Hans Christian Andersen's Own Story. Part 2. The children were always his friends, and he was theirs. Hans Christian Andersen could see many things from his window high over the city. But there was one big fact right under his own nose that he could not see. The plays and poetry that he wrote were not very good. But there were beautiful lines here and there in his writing, and Jonas Collin of the Royal Theatre found those lines. This kind man collected money from friends to send the young writer to school. Filled with hope, Hans Christian entered a school near Elsinore. He was to live with Simon Maesling, the head of the school. Maesling was an unsuccessful writer of poetry, and he was jealous of Hans. So he put the big awkward boy in a class with children who were only 10 years old. Hans did very well, but Maesling told him that he was failing in his studies. Maesling did not want to lose Hans, however. Hans could keep the Maesling children quiet for hours at a time by telling them fairy stories. In Copenhagen again. When Collin learned how badly Hans was being treated at Maesling's school, he brought the boy back to Copenhagen to study. Again, Hans felt most at ease with the children. He ate his dinner in turn at the homes of 6 kind friends. In each home, the children begged him for stories. Hans told a tale so clearly that you could see and hear toy soldiers marching and toy horses galloping. And he could cut from paper the most wonderful forms and patterns. The paper forms that he made are kept today in the Andersen Museum, the house where he was born in Odense. Andersen never married. The good Collin family, 3 generations of them, became all the family he was ever to have. They all loved him, but they wanted him to be sensible too. They begged him to stop writing poetry and plays and to try to get a job in the government of Denmark. They talked as he later made the animals talk in his stories. "I tell you for your own good," said the hen to the ugly duckling. "You should learn to lay eggs like me." In The Ugly Duckling, Hans Christian told the story of his own life. But his understanding of himself came slowly. For years he continued to write poetry and tragic plays that are almost forgotten today. His many failures fell like blows upon his heart. His first book of fairy stories was published in 1835. Andersen had no hope for its success, but children read the stories and wanted more. So, pulled by their interest, he began what we know today as his great work. For 37 years, a new book of Andersen's fairy tales was published each Christmas. The books were full of everyday truth, of wonder, of sad beauty, of humor. Children and their fathers and mothers had never read such tales before. Andersen's tales are a poet's way of telling us the truth about ourselves. He looked deeply into the heart of things. Even in a child's toy lost in the street, he could see some story with the light of gold in it. All of us laugh at the humor of the emperor's new clothes. But we remember the story every time men pretend to be something that they are not. Although he was famous now, he was more gentle of heart than ever. Maesling, now an old and unhappy man, met Andersen on the street one day and said that he was sorry for the way he once treated the great writer. Andersen forgave and comforted the unhappy old man. The prince who had told Andersen to learn a useful trade was now the king. He sent for the writer and told him that he might ask for any favor that he wanted. Andersen answered simply,
"But I don't need anything at all."
Friend of children. He already had the love of the wide world. The awkward figure and sweet ugly face had become so famous that his friends, the children, knew him at once and came to him wherever he was. His books were put into many different languages and read all over the world. He was received at the courts of Europe and smiled upon by many kings. The greatest writers of the day, from Dickens to Victor Hugo, looked upon him as one of themselves. Among them, he learned happily at last that
It doesn't matter if you are born in a duckyard, as long as you come from a swan's egg.
Happiest of all was the day he returned to the duckyard, nearly 50 years after he had left it. All Odense took part in the great celebration for the shoemaker's son who was now the prince of fairy tales. A great dinner was held for him. That night, hundreds of people came to his window and called to him. What was then in his full heart, that gentle heart that had been lonely for so long, was best expressed in his own words.
To God and man, my thanks, my love.